That night I walked into the kitchen after dinner. My father was reading the newspaper. My mother was washing dishes. My sister was upstairs. It was just the three of us. Perfect. I looked directly at them and said the words I'd been carrying my entire life. I know I'm adopted. The room went silent. Completely silent. My father's newspaper slowly lowered. My mother's hands stopped moving. Water continued running into the sink. Nobody spoke. For almost 10 seconds. Then my father stood up. And what happened next shocked me. Because instead of looking guilty, he looked terrified. As if I had just asked the one question he prayed would never be asked. "Who told you that?" he asked quietly. "No one." "Then why would you think that?" I laughed. Actually laughed. Because the answer seemed obvious. "Look at me." My father didn't answer. Neither did my mother. I don't look like anyone in this family. Still silence. Then my mother finally spoke, her voice shaking. "You're not adopted." I stared at her, waiting for more. But nothing came. Just those 3 words. "You're not adopted." The strange thing was, I believed she was telling the truth. For the first time in my life, I genuinely believed her. Because she didn't look guilty. She looked scared. And there was a huge difference. People who hide the truth usually avoid eye contact. My mother couldn't stop looking at me, almost like she was afraid of what might happen next. Then my father walked toward a cabinet near the dining room. He opened a drawer, pulled out a folder, and placed it on the table. Inside was my birth certificate. He pointed at it. "There." I picked it up. The paper looked old, official, real. Yet something felt wrong. I couldn't explain why. But my stomach suddenly tightened, because the document looked like it had been handled recently. Very recently, almost as if someone had checked it before this conversation. My eyes moved toward the bottom. The signature, the hospital seal, the registration number. Everything seemed normal, until I noticed one detail. A tiny detail. One tiny thing that changed everything. The issue date. My birth certificate had supposedly been issued when I was born, but according to the document, it had been reissued when I was 6 years old. Why? I looked up. Why was this reissued? My mother dropped a plate. It shattered on the floor. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. And in that exact moment, I knew. Whatever secret my parents were hiding, it was much bigger than adoption. I couldn't stop staring at the photograph. The resemblance was undeniable. The woman in the picture looked more like me than the woman. I had called Mom for 20 years. My heart pounded in my chest. I wanted to believe it was a coincidence. But deep down, I already knew it wasn't. The next morning, Sarah called me again. This time, she sounded calmer. "I spoke to my sister," she said. "She wants to meet you." I sat in silence. Part of me wanted answers. Another part was terrified of what those answers might be. "Before we meet," Sarah continued, "there's something you need to know." I gripped the phone tighter. When my niece disappeared, the hospital launched an investigation. The police investigated for months. But there was never any evidence of what happened. "What do you mean?" I asked. "The baby simply vanished." A cold chill ran through me. According to Sarah, her sister Emily had given birth to a healthy baby girl exactly 20 years earlier. Everything seemed normal. Then, during the night, a nurse took the baby for a routine examination. The baby never came back. The nurse disappeared. The hospital couldn't identify her. The name on her employee records was fake. The address was fake. Everything was fake. It was as if she had never existed. The police searched for years. Nothing. No witnesses. No fingerprints. No clues. The case eventually went cold. Emily never recovered. Her marriage fell apart. She moved away and spent years searching for answers. And now, after 2 decades, a DNA website had suddenly connected her family to me. I didn't know what to think. A week later, I flew to meet them. The entire flight felt unreal. I kept asking myself the same question. What if they're wrong? What if this is all some huge misunderstanding? But the moment I stepped into the small cafe where we had agreed to meet, those doubts began to disappear. A woman stood up from a table near the window. She looked at me. Then she burst into tears. I froze. It felt like looking into an older version of myself. Same eyes. Same facial structure. Same smile. She slowly approached me. "Hi," she whispered. I couldn't speak. The emotion in her voice was overwhelming. For 20 years, she had believed her daughter was gone forever. And now she was standing in front of me. Or at least she thought she was. We spent hours talking. She showed me old family photos, baby pictures, pictures of relatives, family members I had never met. The similarities were impossible to ignore. By the end of the day, I was emotionally exhausted. But there was still one huge problem. DNA matches suggested we were related. They didn't prove exactly who I was. We needed certainty. So we agreed to take a professional DNA test. The results would take several weeks. Those weeks felt longer than 20 years. I barely slept. I barely ate. Every day felt like living between two different lives. Then the results arrived. I opened the email with trembling hands. 99.999% probability. Emily was my biological mother. I stared at the screen in disbelief. The answer I had searched for my entire life was finally there. But instead of relief, I felt confusion. If Emily was my biological mother, then who were the people who raised me? And how had I ended up with them? I knew there was only one way to find out. I had to confront my parents. The following weekend, I drove to their house. The same house where I had grown up. The same house filled with childhood memories. When Mom opened the door, she immediately knew something was wrong. "You look upset," she said. I walked into the living room. Dad was watching television. I turned it off. "We need to talk." They exchanged nervous glances. Then I placed the DNA report on the table. The color disappeared from their faces. Nobody spoke. For nearly a minute, the room remained silent. Finally, I asked the question. "Who am I?" My mother's eyes filled with tears. Dad looked down at the floor. And then something happened that shocked me even more than the DNA results. They weren't surprised. Not at all. They looked like people who had been waiting 20 years for this moment. My mother began crying. Dad covered his face with his hands, and in a broken voice he said, "We always knew this day would come." My heart stopped. "What do you mean?" My mother wiped away tears. Then she said words that changed everything. "We didn't steal you." I stared at her. "What?" "We found you." The room suddenly felt very quiet. Dad looked directly at me. "We found you 20 years ago, abandoned." My mind raced. Nothing made sense anymore. If they hadn't kidnapped me, then who had? And why had someone stolen my identity? The answers were finally coming. But the truth was far darker than anything I had imagined. I sat frozen on the couch. My parents had just admitted they knew something was wrong all along, but they insisted they hadn't kidnapped me. They had found me. The words echoed in my head. "We found you." "Tell me everything," I demanded. My father took a deep breath. Then he began a story I had never heard before. 20 years earlier, my parents had been unable to have children of their own. After years of failed treatments and heartbreak, they had nearly given up on the dream of becoming parents. One rainy night, while driving home from work, my father noticed something unusual near an abandoned roadside building. A car was parked with its door open. No lights. No driver. Nothing. At first, he ignored it. But then he heard a sound. A baby crying. He stopped the car immediately. Inside the abandoned building, wrapped in a blanket, was a tiny baby girl. Me. No note. No identification. Nothing. Just a baby left completely alone. My parents called the police. An investigation was opened. But nobody came forward. No missing person reports matched. No relatives were found. Months passed. Eventually, through legal channels, they were granted custody. And later, they officially adopted me. I listened carefully. Something didn't fit. If I was legally adopted, I asked, "Why didn't you tell me?" My mother lowered her head. "Because we were afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Afraid someone would take you away?" The room fell silent. For years, they had kept the secret because they believed they were protecting me. But now another question remained. If they had adopted me legally, why did my documents show them as my biological parents? My father looked uncomfortable. Very uncomfortable. Then he admitted something. "We didn't create those documents." "What documents?" "Your birth certificate." I felt a knot form in my stomach. According to him, when the adoption was finalized, officials provided new paperwork. My parents trusted the process. They never questioned it. But after my DNA results appeared, they secretly hired a lawyer. And what the lawyer found was horrifying. My original adoption records had disappeared. Completely. The court file was missing. The hospital records were missing. Several documents appeared to be forged. Someone had altered my identity. Someone with access to official records. Someone powerful. At that moment, this stopped being a family mystery. It became a criminal investigation. The lawyer contacted authorities. Within weeks, detectives reopened multiple cold cases connected to missing infants from 20 years earlier. And that's when another shocking discovery emerged. The fake nurse who had taken Emily's baby wasn't acting alone. Investigators found evidence linking her to at least 7 other disappearances. 7 babies, 7 families, 7 destroyed lives. For decades, nobody had connected the cases. The crimes happened in different cities, different hospitals, different states, different names. But now modern DNA databases were exposing connections that had been invisible before. Detectives believed they were dealing with an organized baby trafficking network, a network that had operated quietly for years. The realization made me sick. I wasn't simply a missing child. I was evidence of a crime nobody had solved. A few months later, investigators asked to meet me. They wanted my help. Inside a conference room, detectives spread photographs across a table. Old surveillance images, hospital employees, witness sketches, possible suspects. One photograph immediately caught my attention. A woman in her 40s. Dark hair, sharp eyes. Something about her seemed familiar. Very familiar. The detective noticed my reaction. "You recognize her?" I hesitated. Then my blood ran cold. "I've seen her before." The room went silent. The detective leaned forward. "Where?" I swallowed hard. I knew exactly where. I had seen her many times growing up. Not recently, not often, but enough to remember. She used to visit our neighborhood when I was a child. She always watched from a distance. Never spoke much. Never stayed long. At the time, I thought she was just a family friend. But now I wasn't so sure. The detective exchanged looks with his partner. Then he revealed something that changed everything. The woman in the photograph wasn't just a suspect. She was believed to be the fake nurse who had disappeared from the hospital 20 years ago. My heart nearly stopped. The woman who stole a baby? The woman connected to multiple disappearances had somehow remained close enough to watch me grow up. Which meant one thing. She knew exactly who I was. And if she knew, then she might already know that the investigation had reopened. The detective's next words sent a chill through the room. "We think she's still alive." That night, I couldn't sleep. For 20 years, someone had hidden the truth. For 20 years, someone had watched from the shadows. And now, after all this time, the person responsible might finally be within reach. But none of us realized how dangerous the situation was about to become. Because 3 days later, I received a package with no return address. Inside was a single photograph, a recent photograph, of me, standing outside my apartment. Someone had been watching, and attached to the photo was a handwritten note. My hands shook as I stared at the photograph. It had clearly been taken only days earlier. I was standing outside my apartment building, holding a cup of coffee and checking my phone. I had no idea anyone was there. Yet someone had been close enough to take a clear picture. And now they wanted me to know it. The message attached to the photo was even worse. Stop looking for answers. No signature. No explanation. Just a warning. I immediately contacted the detectives. Within hours, they arrived at my apartment and collected the photograph for analysis. One detective looked particularly concerned. "This changes things," he said. "How?" "It means whoever is involved knows the investigation has been reopened." For the first time, I felt genuinely afraid. Until then, the mystery had seemed distant. Something that happened 20 years ago. But now it felt personal. Very personal. Someone was watching me. Someone who didn't want the truth exposed. The following week, detectives intensified their search for the fake nurse. Her real name was still unknown. For years, she had used dozens of identities. Fake driver's licenses, fake employment records, fake addresses. She seemed to disappear every time authorities got close. But this time was different. Modern technology was uncovering things investigators couldn't see 20 years ago. Old financial records, phone logs, DNA databases. Bit by bit, the puzzle was coming together. Then one morning, Detective Harris called me. "We found something." His voice sounded excited and worried. "What is it?" I asked. "We located a storage unit." The storage unit had been rented under one of the fake nurses' aliases nearly 20 years earlier. For decades, nobody knew it existed, because the rental payments had been made through shell accounts and fake identities. A search warrant was approved immediately. When investigators opened the unit, they couldn't believe what they found. Boxes. Dozens of them. Inside were photographs, documents, hospital badges, fake identification cards, and notebooks. Evidence from crimes stretching back years. One notebook contained detailed information about babies, birth dates, hospital names, family information, schedules. Everything. It was like reading the blueprint of a nightmare. And then investigators found something even more shocking: a photograph of me. Not as an adult. As a baby. On the back was a handwritten note. Transfer successful. My stomach turned. I wasn't lost. I wasn't abandoned. I had been taken. The evidence was undeniable. The woman had kidnapped me from the hospital. But the biggest question remained unanswered. Why? What happened after that? The answer came from another discovery inside the storage unit. A collection of letters. Most had never been mailed. Many were written between members of the criminal organization. According to investigators, the fake nurse wasn't acting independently. She worked for a larger network, a group that specialized in stealing identities and illegally placing children into new families. Some children were sold. Some disappeared entirely. Others were given new identities. The operation had lasted for years before eventually collapsing. Most of the members vanished. Some died, others changed identities and disappeared. But one person appeared repeatedly throughout the letters. The same name appeared over and over. A person referred to only as the director. Nobody knew who the director was. No photographs existed. No confirmed identity. Just a title. Yet every major decision seemed to come from this mysterious person. Detectives believed the director had organized the entire operation. And if they were still alive, they might hold answers to every missing child case connected to the network. Then came the breakthrough. Fingerprints recovered. From the storage unit matched. A woman living under a false identity nearly 800 miles away. The fake nurse. After 20 years, investigators finally knew where she was. An arrest operation was planned immediately. But before police could move, something unexpected happened. She disappeared. Again. The moment investigators arrived at her home, it was empty. No furniture. No personal belongings. Nothing. It looked as if she had vanished overnight. Someone had warned her. The question was who. A few days later, another package arrived at my apartment. This time, there was no photograph. Only a USB drive. Detectives examined it carefully before allowing me to see its contents. The drive contained a single video. The timestamp showed it had been recorded just 2 days earlier. A woman sat in front of the camera. Older now. Gray hair. Wrinkled face. But I recognized her immediately. The fake nurse. She looked directly into the camera. Then she spoke. By the time you watch this, I'll be gone. My pulse raced. The room became silent. Everyone listened. For 20 years, this woman had hidden from the world. And now she was finally talking. What she revealed next would expose secrets nobody expected, including the identity of the mysterious director, and the shocking reason I had been taken in the first place.
क्योंकि अगर लॉगिन होता तो फिर इधर से देखें जीमेल भी तो मेरी वही पुरानी वाली खुल रही है ना मुझे सर्च में आ रहा है ना तब लॉगिन नहीं हुआ हुआ
The room was silent as the video played. The woman on the screen looked exhausted. For 20 years, she had hidden from the police. For 20 years, families had searched for answers. Now, at last, she was speaking. She stared directly into the camera. Then she said something nobody expected. I never wanted to hurt the children. Detective Harris scoffed. But the woman continued, I know nobody will believe me. Maybe they shouldn't. But the truth is more complicated than you think. I couldn't take my eyes off the screen. She took a deep breath. Then she began her confession. 20 years earlier, she had worked for a criminal organization that specialized in identity fraud. At first, their operations focused on forged documents and financial scams. Then everything changed. One of the group's leaders discovered a horrifying opportunity. Children, babies with no ability to identify themselves. Children whose identities could be erased and replaced. The network began targeting hospitals with weak security systems. Employees were bribed. Records were altered. Birth certificates were forged. Entire identities disappeared overnight. The woman admitted her role. She had posed as a nurse. She had removed babies from hospitals. She had delivered them to people higher in the organization. but she claimed she wasn't the mastermind. Every order came from one person. The director. The woman lowered her head. Then she finally revealed the name. The detectives watching the video immediately froze. I saw genuine shock on their faces. "What?" I asked. Nobody answered. Instead, Detective Harris paused the video. The room became very quiet. Finally, he looked at me. "The director isn't a criminal you've never met." A knot formed in my stomach. "What do you mean?" He hesitated. Then he said it. "The director is someone connected to your case." My heart pounded. The detective pressed play. The woman looked into the camera. Then she spoke the name. For several seconds, I couldn't breathe. I knew that name. Everyone did. The director wasn't hiding in another country. The director wasn't living under a fake identity. The director had spent years appearing as a respected member of society, a successful businessman, a charity donor, a public figure admired by thousands. The entire room sat in stunned silence. The person responsible had hidden in plain sight for decades. But the biggest surprise was still coming. The woman continued speaking. "Your case was different." My pulse quickened. "Different? How?" "You weren't selected randomly." The words hit me like a truck. I leaned closer to the screen. "What does that mean?" I whispered. The answer arrived seconds later. According to the woman, my biological mother wasn't the original target. Neither was I. The real target had been my biological grandfather. Years before my birth, he had testified in a major fraud investigation connected to members of the criminal network. His testimony had cost the organization millions. The director never forgot, never forgave, and when an opportunity appeared, revenge followed. The kidnapping wasn't only about money. It was personal. I felt sick. 20 years of confusion, 20 years of missing answers, 20 years of pain. All because someone wanted revenge against a man I had never even met. The video continued. The woman explained that after I was taken, unexpected problems emerged. Police attention increased. Internal disputes broke out. Members started turning against each other. The network slowly collapsed. Some members were arrested. Others disappeared. Several died under mysterious circumstances. Eventually, the organization destroyed itself. But the director survived. He escaped every investigation, every accusation, every scandal. For 20 years. Until now. The video ended with one final message. "If you're watching this, the truth is finally out. I'm sorry." The screen went black. Nobody spoke. Hours later, authorities launched a massive operation. Search warrants were executed. Financial records were seized. Properties were searched. The director was finally arrested. News outlets across the country exploded with coverage. The case became national news. Families connected to the missing child investigations finally received answers. Not all the answers they wanted, but enough to begin healing. Months later, I stood outside a courthouse. The trial was over. The people responsible had been exposed. Justice, though delayed, had finally arrived. Yet my biggest challenge wasn't the criminal case. It was figuring out who I was. I had two families. One family gave me life. The other family raised me. Neither relationship was simple. Neither could replace the other. But over time, something unexpected happened. Instead of choosing one family over the other, we became connected. Birthdays were shared. Holidays were shared. Memories were shared. For the first time in my life, I stopped feeling like I didn't belong. Because the truth wasn't that I belonged to one family or the other. I belonged to both. And although 20 years had been stolen from us, we refused to let the future be stolen too. As for the question that haunted me since childhood, who am I? I finally found the answer. I wasn't the girl who was abandoned. I wasn't the victim whose identity was stolen. I wasn't the mystery everyone tried to solve. I was a survivor. And after 20 years of lies, I finally had my name, my history, and my life back. The end.